Leon Blumenrader with Big Hoss One Sauce, and you're listening to the best show on all things barbecue with my man, Greg Rempe.
You're listening to KCBS. All the barbecue hits, all the time. All the time. Or mostly on time.
And it's time for a KCBS weather break. It's currently 62 degrees outside. It might be 72 degrees. We're not exactly sure. Let me check. Shit. We have no idea. So let's split the difference and go with 67. Yes, it's definitely 67 at KCBS. We think.
We'll do it live. Okay. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and oh! Should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
All right, good evening, and welcome to the really big Barbecue Central show. This is the show where we talk about all things that are important in the world of barbecue and grilling. The show originating from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city, Bomb City, USA, Cleveland, Ohio, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. I am your program host, Greg Rempe. Happy to have you aboard here on your Tuesday evenings live fire fun and frivolity show. If you want to get in contact with the show, follow me during off-show hours. Here's how you do all that stuff.
You can get in touch with the show by sending an email to Greg at bbqcentralshow.com. Follow us on all the social media channels at BBQ Central Show. And be sure to subscribe to the show podcast feed on your favorite podcast platform.
Anything else you want to find out about the show can be found at the main website, thebbqcentralshow.com. And here's what's happening in case you get the newsletter. Typically, in a second Tuesday of the month, you will find the first hour being taken up by number 1, Meathead from AmazingRibs.com, number 2, Robert Moss from RobertFMoss.com. But since we have recently put in a 2023 class of Barbecue Central Show Guest Hall of Fame members, what do we do when we put in a new class? We reach out to the new class. We bring them in for what? The origin stories. And first up for the origin stories here this evening is the second Tuesday of the month, regular guest in the first hour, 35 past segment, Robert F. Moss. So Meathead has relinquished his normal segment. We'll do the first hour with Robert Moss, and we'll do the deep dive origin story that you've come to know and love. We'll learn all about Robert from when he was born and how it has progressed to where the career is today, so looking forward to that. And then we will move to the second hour where we will have a longtime sponsor of the show, a person who steers the ship of a company that builds some of the most prolific and sexy barbecue pits out there. Ryan Zboril joins us on the show. Ryan Zboril joins me on the show. What the hell is wrong? So we'll get the status of 2023, how fiscal year has looked like for him, especially compared to the last couple of years. We'll take a peek into the first half of next year, overarching goals for 2024, new products, trends in the industry that he might be seeing. So Ryan Zboril in the second hour leading off and then closing out the show. It's been 7 years since we had him on the first time. Big shot now, big shot back then. The pitmaster of Heath Riles Barbecue, Heath Riles, joins the show. That's a huge hammer out of the bullpen. The last time I talked to Heath Riles, he was Victory Lane Barbecue branded. He has since gone through a tremendous rebrand, really hit the rub, sauce products market. He had all of those. Now he's added more. Now he's gone through the rebrand, so we'll talk about all of that. He now has a YouTube channel, of course, which you know about, and he's launched a podcast, what might be 30, 40 episodes or so. So really getting the social media aspect things and all the digital media platforms to try and help promote and grow that brand, do the digital storytelling, what have you. So really excited to catch up with Heath Riles as he closes the show. So that's how it sets up tonight. Robert Moss in the first hour with the origin story, and then Ryan Zboril from Pits and Spits, Heath Riles from Heath Riles Barbecue closing out the show. Don't forget you can follow me socially, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Snapchat at BBQ Central Show. And we say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of the video streaming platform options. You can do it through Facebook and Twitch/BBQ Central Show. You can also watch over on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show, where we do have a new YouTube poll question of the week. And I'm asking everybody this, including all guests. Even if money wasn't a factor, you prefer prime beef over Wagyu. And currently, we are at a deadlock of 50-50. 50% of you saying yes, you prefer prime over Wagyu. And 50% of you saying no, you do not prefer prime over Wagyu. For me, gun to head, I'm going prime over Wagyu, especially if I'm able to source it myself. That's just my flavor profile. That's just my palate. But we are deadlocked currently right now, although no's just tipped the scale and they are winning. I'm sorry, no's. That's what I meant to say. So we'll see how it goes through the rest of the show. I'll ask Robert Moss as we lead off the origin story, and then we'll also ask Ryan and Heath in the second hour, and I'll do my best to give you an update at the end of the show and throughout the show, of course. So let's start here this evening. I'm not going to break down the Rod Gray interview from last week in gory detail. The interview, no doubt, solidifies one of two things. One, you think he's doing a great job handling the American Royal situation, or two, there's a lot of talking and not a lot of discernible information being put out as to how this isn't going to be an issue going forward. So whatever side of the fence that you fall on, I mostly hope that you enjoyed the extended segment with Rod Gray last week. I certainly appreciate that he hang in there for basically an hour and fielding those questions. Quick correction on my part from last week. I did ask Rod during the questioning why there was no lead reps put in place this year, but after re-listening to the other shows, he did indeed say that there were lead reps at this event. That was my mistake. And I've spent a lot of time listening to the segment that we did over the course of the week. I've also read through a lot of comments and reactions that folks have sent in. And I want to tie this up with a few summary thoughts. Like many of you, I do think it was odd that Rod said he has no job at the American Royal and that he pushes a broom and picks up trash. I did find that odd. But if that's the case, and he's not allowed to have anything to do with the inner workings of the contest, then I'm going to take him at his word. I don't know the ins and outs of a contest or what the CEO is responsible for at contests, and evidently it's nothing to do with the inner workings of said contest. However, I do know that the American Royal is the Kansas City Barbecue Society's the biggest event and biggest customer each year. I also know how business is run. So even if there's nothing for him to do as relates to the contest, which, again, we all kind of think is odd, there are numerous and valuable things for a CEO to do at the contest that doesn't involve the intricacies of running the contest itself. For instance, hanging out with the folks at the American Royal and building deeper relationships with them. The Royal probably has their sponsors attending the event. Why not help them build even more value to their sponsors? Maybe those sponsors could cross over and sponsor the KCBS in some way. I'm sure the CEO position has some responsibility in securing sponsorship business over the course of a fiscal year. To that end, I'm sure the KCBS sponsors are also attending the Royal. why not stay at least as long as they stay and deepen those relationships as well, and doing it in person? Maybe there's an opportunity to mine those sponsors on information for new sponsors that also might be interested in coming on board with the KCBS and a potential sponsorship opportunity. Of course, you have the public relations piece that I mentioned last week during the interview. And I understand Rod said he doesn't want to steal the spotlight from anybody, but I don't think anyone's thinking that the CEO is stealing anything from them. Perhaps just the opposite. I think they would really appreciate being able to memorialize their achievement with a photo of the top rank official there at KCBS. I mean, everybody loves being in pictures with important people. By the way, doing the PR stuff also yields social media content, a lot of it. And it's all evergreen stuff that can be reused year after year after year. I'm sure the social media person would love to have access to that kind of content to post on all of their social media platforms. How about this? Toss out everything I just mentioned. Let's focus on this specific contest. You have the biggest convergence of KCBS members and potential KCBS members in one location for an extended weekend. Why not spend every second you can with your membership? Ask them what's working, what's not working, what would you like to see improved, tweaked, adjusted. Meet as many members as you can, and maybe some of those members have non-members in tow. You have the opportunity now to gain new members in what I would call a warm environment instead of a cold call situation. So why not take advantage of that opportunity to try and grow the membership at that event specifically, while also building deeper relationships with the current membership? It's a win-win. So indeed, maybe there is nothing the CEO can do within the workings of the contest, but there's plenty to do outside of that. And yes, I reaffirm my answers from last week. I don't compete. I'm not a certified barbecue judge. Henceforth, I have never tabulated a contest in my life. And I get the point that Rod was trying to make last week. And maybe my thoughts aren't as relevant as I think they are, or they did show my lack of knowledge on that topic. But I can tell you this. For as ignorant as I might be on that particular topic, I do know what a plane wreck looks like, and what happened at the Royal was a plane wreck. And to double down with the I would bring the same team to the Royal next year, in my opinion, borderline reckless. You would really trot the same team back out there next year after what happened this year? That is a bold statement. Bold. In any event, that puts a bow on this topic. I'm sure it's not the last time we will talk about it here on the show. And I am certainly anxious, as I'm sure many of you are, to see what happens over the course of the year as we build into the 2024 version of the American Royal, and we'll see how that goes. All right, my pal Robert Moss, a new 2023 Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer, is in the green room. And he is ready to rock. Before we get into that, are you tired of settling for mediocre grilling experiences? It's time to step up your game and bring the ultimate flavor and cooker to the backyard barbecues. Pits and Spits charcoal grills offer the highest quality live fire cooking experience you can get in the market today. Using either wood or charcoal, their solid fuel grills produce those classic flavors for when you have the time to fire up the grill and cook for family and friends. With a large adjustable fuel tray, you can raise and lower the fire to control and fine-tune the heat. This is their take on the very popular Santa Maria-style grill. Check them out online, pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central Show. That's pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central Show. By the way, all spelled out. And the Pits and the Spits is spelled with the double T on the Pits and the Spits. By the way, if you want to save $150 off a charcoal grill purchase, use promo code Charcoal Central, all one word, Charcoal Central at checkout, and you can save exactly $150 off any charcoal grill for sale. Once again, it's pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central and promo code Charcoal Central for that discount of $150 off a charcoal grill at Pits and Spits. Origin story time. We're back at it with our monthly guest, Robert Moss. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the BBQ Central Show. Broadcasting live from the BBQ Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the BBQ Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
Well, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by cookinpellets.com, your number one source for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. Visit cookinpellets.com for more information, see what products they offer. And then when it's time to buy, where do I tell you to go? Not cookinpellets.com for great shipping rates, but a same selection of products. You go to amazon.com, lowes.com, or walmart.com. Again, same stuff to buy, just better shipping rates than if you did it on the namesake website. Good folks over at cookinpellets.com. Lining up Chris Becker for an origin story as we speak. My next guest is the contributing barbecue editor for Southern Living Magazine, an accomplished author, restaurant critic, podcast host, and most importantly, as we add things to the introduction titles, 2023 BBQ Central Show's guest Hall of Famer. Of course, we welcome back Robert Moss. Robert, before we dig into the origin story, we do have a YouTube poll question of the week that we need your answer on immediately, if not sooner, and we're asking everybody this. If money wasn't a factor, or even if money wasn't a factor, you prefer prime over Wagyu beef?
Yes, I much prefer prime over Wagyu.
All right. Well, 40% of us agree with you that we prefer prime over Wagyu, but 60% taking it currently. And before we dive into the origin story, do you have any type of acceptance speech that you've worked up here over the last 2-3 weeks to talk about this incredible life achievement that you have been garnered with?
No, I do have the ring, which I have to say is
wow, look at that,
remarkably understated and elegant. So
yes.
I do really appreciate that. I do sort of think this may be the pinnacle of my career. So I may have pretty much accomplished everything there's left to accomplish in the barbecue world. I did get my Jack ribbon, so I am now a KCBS certified judge. So I did that back in a couple weeks ago. And so I think, what's left now, I've got the Hall of Fame ring. So I think, I can relax for a while.
You got the Cool Whip on top of the whole barbecue career at this point. So good to know. Let's go ahead and dig into the origin story. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of these that we've done in the past over the last handful of years, but we're going to do the deep dive on Robert Moss. So let's start all the way back in the beginning. Where were you born and when were you born?
I was born in 1970 in Decatur, Georgia. Though I don't remember Decatur. I moved from there when I was 1 year old, but I am a Georgian by birth and then a South Carolinian for most of the rest of my life.
What was family like for you growing up before you got into high school that you remember?
Well, my father's, he's retired now, but he was a Presbyterian minister. And so we traveled around a good bit, bounced around a good bit when I was young, lived in a couple different small towns in Georgia and South Carolina before we ended up in Greenville. I have two brothers, family is still together. My parents have celebrated their, 50 something, they're over 50 now, anniversary. So for me, at least, a very, stable home life. And once we got to Greenville, at least, I was about 10 years old then I sort of, had that as my hometown. So, I don't think of it as a particularly interesting or remarkable childhood, but I remember, being a pretty good childhood. I don't have a lot of, I have neither great or terrible stories to tell about it.
What kind of a relationship do you recall having with your parents as you're growing up outside of the high school years?
You mean before or after
Before,
high
yeah.
school? Oh, before. Um, Gosh, I don't know. I don't think that too much about that time. I had a little more of a, more of a rebellious kid in high school, but I was a pretty, pretty good kid up through 16, 17. I think like most kids. Did a lot of sports, lot of activities, and so you know, let's say I don't have a lot of great stories from the childhood, but a good relationship I think all around with my parents.
You mentioned you had some other siblings in the house. What was your relationship growing up like with them?
We're pretty close in age. My older brother is just a year and a half older than me, and my younger is, I think, a year, 2 years younger than me. So we were all pretty close together. We had a lot of sibling rivalry. We all played sports and played music, and we're pretty competitive with each other, but in I think a pretty good nature way. So we had a good relationship growing up. We aren't super close now. They all live all over the country, but I see each other. I see them a couple times a year, and we still stay in touch.
What's the high school Robert Moss like? You had mentioned that you got into a little bit of a rebellious stage, and high school can be a little bit of an awkward time for a lot of folks. I mean, you either were popular and you had a great time and they were the best years of your life for some of them, or maybe you were a bit ostracized and you find it hard to fit in. What was it like for you?
I changed a lot in high school, and there are kids who are that way. I changed physically. I think I entered to high school probably about 5 foot, maybe 5'2", and 110 pounds, the skinniest, tiniest kid in the class. And my sophomore year, I grew 10 inches in a single year,
Wow.
and ended up being tall and very skinny. So that changed a lot physically there. Same thing. I was very shy and socially awkward. I think early in high school, and still I was still sort of a shy kid, a little bit of a nerdy kid through high school, but started to, I think, blossom a lot more as I got older. Um, Started off not too interested in school and academics, and the more I was in school, the more in high school, the more interested I got in studying, and as I got deeper into a range of subjects, became much more interested, got much better grades as I went along. Um, was very much a nerdy kid in middle school. I was a computer programmer back in the old days. Had a TRS-80 color computer, if anybody remembers that. Ran a bulletin board system out of my house when I was about 7 years old, or seventh grade, I should say. Back when it was all you had was dial-up modems, and we only had a single
Yeah.
phone line, so I could run the bulletin board between, I think, 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night. Uh, because if the phone rang, the modem would pick up. Anybody calling us would hear the screech of a modem on it. So that's the sort of I got started in computers very early, read a lot of science fiction and all that. So I was a pretty, science geeky kid. But then in high school, I got much more into literature, and this is relevant to my barbecue writing eventually. Much more reading a lot of novels, and reading a lot of different things, and sort of moved, started developing more of the humanities side of the brain. I think you would say, and really got it. I had a lot of great teachers in high school, especially junior and senior year in high school, that really inspired me to get into learning. So I think I exited high school very different than I was when I entered it as a freshman.
Were the grades because you knew you were building into having to go into a secondary education, or did you just build an interest? So
No, it's
by
more building an interest. I think I
yeah,
was bored when I was younger. I was in middle school, and I think when I got to high school, and then you sort of separate out and you start taking honors and AP classes and all that. I think the more challenging it got, I sort of rose to the challenge. I think if it was boring to me early on, so I didn't put much effort into it. But at a certain point, I just enjoyed the subject, whether it was calculus, or if it was computer science, or it was English, or history, and really got into it for its own sake. Was really big into, actually, it's funny now, I was really big into chemistry and physics, and thought initially I was going to be a double physics math major when I went off to college, but things changed quite a bit. But I exited high school very interested in learning on my own terms, and I think I had a good group of friends who, and at the same time, we were, I would say, I didn't mention the rebellious side. We stayed out. We did things that 17, 18-year-old kids do, and got into a lot of trouble. But at the same time, I was with a group of people who were very serious about music, very serious about books, and so we sort of mix the fun side of life with the studious side.
What kind of music are you into back then?
Back then, it's hard to say. So I was actually a musician. I played drums all from middle school on. We played in the the marching band in high school. Started playing drum set. I was very much into. I got much more into alt rock kind of stuff when I did later when I was in college and grad school. But back then, I think I was much more into. Well, actually, I guess I was into classic, what we call classic rock now.
Hmm.
Got really into folks like the Rolling Stones and uh, a lot of the '60s hippie rock, if you would. Grateful Dead and all that kind of stuff. Back then, and of course that evolved, but I got very much into, and I was even into like a lot of the art rock. Being a drummer, I wanted to hear the all those Berkeley School of Music drummers and studio drummers who were really highly technical. So I really got into sort of geeky music as well.
If I hear somebody has a father that is in the religion business, I immediately start to think, man, it must be a strict household. Got to watch your P's and Q's. Could be mega rebellious. Was he like that, or was he pretty laid back guy?
No, I think people hear preacher's kid and they think, oh gosh, you must have grown up like not definitely it's a Presbyterian church. It's pretty mild mannered. It's not a super fundamentalist church. So no, I wasn't raised in a super strict environment, so I didn't have too much to rebel against. If compared to friends of mine who grew up in very religious households. But so yeah, sort of a very moderate religious household. So I think I got a good moral compass from it, but I didn't feel like I was restrained or restricted.
What's the food scene like in the house as you're growing up?
Yeah, it's interesting because this was really, we're talking about the 1980s here, and the food scene in America in general is very interesting at that time. Um, my mom has always been a very good home cook. Cooked lots of things from scratch, and so I grew up having, unlike some of my friends, I grew up having a regular family dinner where my mother cooked most everything herself. Not to say they never opened cans of cream of mushroom soup and stuff like that, but it was pretty good. Made her own bread and that kind of thing. So I think I got a little introduction to good home cooking, I would say, through my parents. And then of course that was the era of fast food chains rising. So, when I was outside the house, my family did not eat out at restaurants a lot, which is an interesting dynamic for me now because I eat out at restaurants all the time. We very rarely, up until I was probably in high school, we very rarely went out to eat dinner. Even if we're traveling somewhere, we would usually pack a picnic lunch to eat along the way instead of stopping off at fast food. I think part of that was because, Presbyterian minister did make a lot of money, so I think part of that was saving money until my father got farther along in the career. But also, I think my mother just had that reflexive reaction against fancy restaurants and all that kind of stuff. So that is one thing I did not grow up with. It was eating at any kind of things that you consider a fancy restaurant or anything like that. So I got lots of good, I'd say, good solid home cooking just around the dinner table at home.
Was there any live fire cooking being done or barbecue that would have sparked an interest?
Definitely
in you
not
as
what
a
I
youth?
would call. Yeah, definitely not what I would call barbecue. No one was. I'm not like a lot of my friends who grew up on farms. They would, they would cook whole hogs and all that kind of stuff. But we lived in suburban Greenville, South Carolina. So there was no low and slow. There was no pig cooking going on. A lot of grilling though. My grandfather in particular, who died when I was in middle school, but while he was still alive, we would spend a lot of time together. And he was always grilling, burgers or steaks or that kind of thing. Used the charcoal chimney, which is where I learned how to use a charcoal chimney early on, and returned to it later when I realized how ridiculous lighter fluid and all that is, and how easy a charcoal chimney is. So a lot of grilling, but not much in the way of barbecue when I was up until I was much older.
After you get through high school, are you pretty much set that you're going to go to college, or did you think about any gap years, or maybe you took a gap year, or was it straight to
No,
college?
there was no question in my mind that I was going on to college. I wasn't pushed into it. It's just sort of just something I wanted to do, but I wanted to get as far away from Greenville as I could. And, college was the easy way to do that. So you know, I was very interested in learning. I wasn't super motivated to like apply to all these colleges and do that whole thing, but I knew I was going to end up, going to college. I ended up going to Florida State down in Tallahassee, which was a good 8-hour drive, I think, from Greenville. So it was a good long way away from home, which is what I wanted at the time, and just hit the ground there. And then you may know I've spent, gosh, I then proceeded to spend the next 12 years or so in academia.
Oh.
From then, so I spent many years on college campuses after that.
When you got on the Florida State's campus, what are you studying right off the bat?
Yeah, it was interesting. I went down to Florida State initially, torn to whether I wanted to do computer science, physics, math, or some combination of all that. It was very heavy in the sciences. And one of the reasons I ended up at Florida State is at the time they had a big computer science program with a supercomputer and all this kind of stuff.
Oh.
And this was before internet. So I actually had one of the first email accounts at a time when nobody had email accounts. But if you were in the computer science program, you would get one on the big VAX mini computer system. And it was really just been used for, military and academic, sciences discussions. In fact, I had a friend who went to Clemson who was also computer science. He got an email address and we were like emailing each other, trying to say, hey, you want to come down and visit? And we got a nasty note from the administrator saying, this email system is for academic purposes only.
Oh.
So you are not allowed to organize your weekend over email. You can only talk about serious, studious topics. So I was on the internet before there was the World Wide Web, before anybody else had it, and so it was very early on in the computer world. And that was about the first year at Florida State. And then something flipped in me, and I got really bored with all that at some point, and this got really interested in literature again. I took a Russian literature class with just sort of randomly with a really good professor that we read all these weird Russian novels and fell in love with it, and then decided that really what I wanted to do was study literature. And after being away from home for a year and a half, Greenville didn't seem like such a terrible place anymore. So I ended up transferring back to Furman University in Greenville, getting a major in English there. So I got a BA in English and graduated from there in 1992, back in Greenville.
And then you proceed to go on and get a doctorate.
Yeah, the rest of my life from there till at least 10 years later, was really not a result of any kind of planning or forethought. I just sort of did what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got a Furman, so I waited tables at a restaurant for a little while. I actually graduated a semester early. So I spent a semester just working at a seafood restaurant and trying to figure it out, and said, well, this isn't what I want to do long term. And so I applied for the master's program down at University of South Carolina to study American Lit there. Moved down to Columbia from Greenville, and then spent the next 10 years in Columbia. Liked the master's program, was enjoying studying, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went on and went into the PhD program, and I went on and was and got to a PhD, almost to the PhD. I finished all my classwork and was ABD, as they call it, which I was working my dissertation. And at that point decided I really didn't want to go into teaching. I didn't want to be a professor, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that was in the early days of the .com boom. So I did the natural thing, which is I went back to computers and took my PhD and got a job in the computer industry. Fortunately, I did finish my dissertation and did finish the PhD. But by the time I did, I had this was literally in the era of pets.com and the sock puppet, if you remember. Yep. All those fun things. And I got swept up into the .com days and finished PhD, but went into the tech industry. And that's what made my career there up until even today. I mean, a lot of people who know about my writing and barbecue stuff may not realize, but most of my career has been spent in the software world, and I still have my own technology consulting company and do that as my primary line of work even today.
So is the PhD in literature? Yeah,
PhD in American literature. So like I say, it wasn't a well mapped out, thought out plan for how I was going to get from point A to point B. While I was working on my PhD was when the World Wide Web was really first developing and crossing over from academic, from the sciences to the larger academic world. So as I was in the humanities program, I sort of got back into computer programming. I started building websites back when you used to build websites by typing the HTML code and all that. And I at the university helped stage a lot of online scholarship, like putting literary scholarship and things online, which both, which got me back into the world of computers where I had been earlier in my life. And I ended up writing my dissertation. I did a hypertext edition of the works of Raymond Chandler, who is the great hardboiled detective novelist. Philip Marlowe is his detective protagonist, and so I did a electronic edition of The Big Sleep. There was a hypertext edition, and wrote a big dissertation about it that is sitting on the shelf still. No one has read it since, but it got me back into the world of software and computers, and so I went back that direction for.
I mean, it sounds like
years.
you had competing passions, and depending, I'm going to use this loosely, but depending on where the wind was blowing, you were going back into computers, or now I'm going back into the literature thing. Neither being the wrong answer, but it sounds like you're able to take advantage of both.
Yeah, it's worked out well. I mean, one thing about being in the technology industry is, it helps if you can program computers, but if you want to get beyond just being an engineer, you also need to be able to talk to people and explain things, and so you have to sort of use both sides of the brain, which it definitely helped me out. I think the more I can focus on something for a long time, and at some point I'll get tired of it. I'll sort of wear out, and I want to go back to that other area and focus on that over there, which is sort of how I've ended up bouncing back and forth between more of the food writing, history, side of my brain, and then go back and spend a lot of time deep in the technology. So,
where does the love story happen for you?
Do you mean love story as in like my wife? And
yeah.
In that, I met my wife at University of South Carolina, and she was like me. Ended up in grad school because she didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. And so we met each other in the English department. She was actually originally getting a master's of English, which is how we met. And she ended up staying in Columbia, and then we sort of, started dating and then got engaged, etc. And then she went and worked for a while doing various things. And then she went back to library school. So if you see all the books behind us, our house is littered with books. She ended up getting a master's of library science at University of South Carolina, and then became a librarian after she graduated, a reference librarian in particular. And so I married a librarian, and we met in grad school and have been together ever since. Just celebrated our 25th anniversary about
really
a
all
month
right
ago.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I think I'm now I got to do math in my head. 97 for I think I'm coming it'll be 27 years next October, so I'm a year ahead of you.
We're at that stage where we did a big event or a big dinner out for the 20th and the big night out for the 25th, and then in between it's just sort of like,
life.
The 23rd's not a big big anniversary.
Yeah, no doubt. Robert, can I put you on hold for 1 second? We'll come back and finish up the rest of your life. We're going to stand by. We're talking with Robert Moss, robertfmoss.com, and as we've just learned, is a computer consultant, and that's the lion's share of the business. Who knew? I thought barbecue was the lion's share of the business. I didn't even know he was doing computers. Maybe he's got some suggestions for me. We'll talk offline, Robert. I have a read for a Primo cooker right here. But forget about it. Sunday, it was going to be Saturday, but it ended up being Sunday. I ordered 2 racks of ribs from our pal Aaron Huntelman. He brought them over Saturday. Now, the worst part of the story is I was home and I didn't hear him ring the doorbell. So he dropped it off in the refrigerator, and then I went out a couple hours later, and I was like, wow. Here I thought we were building this relationship, and he dropped the meat and ran again. What went wrong? But he told me, hey, look, car was there, rang the doorbell, blah, blah, blah. Who cares about any of that? Go right to the Primo, fire it up. I'm really learning how to capture the heat on the way up. So no overshooting, locked it right in around 270, 275. Rub the ribs down with Big Papa's Sweet Money. And then on to the cooker. Hit a few pieces of apple wood in there for wood smoke. Now, I filled a spray bottle with water and apple cider vinegar just for... The thought was to spritz every hour or so just to keep the bark nice and pliable. I'm not a big stiff bark guy on ribs. And what Nick Bauer told me the first time I cooked on the ceramic, he said, wow, it appears to be a very humid environment. He said, yes, when the ceramics heat up, it does produce a humid environment. You're probably not going to need any spray or any mop or anything like that. So I paid attention this time out. No spray needed. The ribs were cooking perfectly, had the deflector plate in there, used normal lump charcoal by whatever brand. The thing hung in there, put them on at 1:30. At 5:15, they're coming off. Did a little wrap procedure about 3 hours into it just to tenderize them. Wow. This Primo is unbelievable. Next day, put all the unlit charcoal over to the side, dropped the lighter cube in there, did some reheat some of the ribs in the foil, but then also did 4 pieces of chicken. This thing's fabulous. I got so much charcoal left over, I can do another long cook if I wanted to, and I can just move the charcoal around, one side, both sides, split it up. You got to get one. I'm telling you right now, holiday season is here. Whoop-de-doo and dickory-dock. Get yourself a Primo. It doesn't rhyme. Only sold through dealers. PrimoGrill.com. That's PrimoGrill.com. Look at the ovals. They'll change your life. Take it from me. We're back with Robert Moss. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by Fireboard. You can monitor up to 6 different temperatures simultaneously. You can connect to Wi-Fi for cloud-based monitoring. You can connect via Bluetooth if you'd like. If you have smart speakers in your home, Fireboard's fully integrated with most of those as well. Go to fireboard.com, call 816-945-2232. And in 2 weeks' time, Ted Conrad will be right here as we talk more about that Fireboard beacon that they were talking about releasing last time he was on about a month and a half ago. So stay tuned for that, and we're rejoined by Robert Moss. So we talked about you getting married. Any kids?
Yep, I have 2 kids, though they're hardly kids anymore. The oldest is just turned 23, and the youngest is 17. He's a senior in high school, so we've got basically 1 year left before we're empty nesters. So we now have two large boys, and the youngest is now like 6'2" and towers over me.
So we have similar aged kids. My oldest is going to be 23 this coming May, and I have one graduating high school this year as well. I also have one in the middle who's going to be graduating college a year early this coming spring. What's been the biggest reward and what's been the biggest challenge raising boys?
Oh, geez. I hadn't thought about that one. I mean, there are lots of challenges to it. I think, my older son is probably a lot like me, and it can be a challenge with just once he, sort of got up. I think the hardest part is when it's a similar but different with the younger one. But when they get old enough to drive and hop in the car and disappear, I think with boys at least that there's a challenge there of just wanting that balance between wanting to let them go and live their lives and fly on their own, but also realizing that, gosh, their brains just aren't developed yet. The things that they're doing. So it's a lot of worry behind the scenes, and then a lot of the occasional annoyances that come with teenage boys. I think that's the hardest thing. That and generally the general filthiness and squalor of teenage boys can be, it's like raising apes. So, but it's sort of just, I think it's waiting them out really, and dealing with young men without a lot of sense of responsibility or hygiene or things like that.
When you look back at specifically how your dad and your relationship was, and now you look at the relationship you have with your 2 sons, and quite honestly, you could have completely different relationships with your 2 sons. But looking back at your experience with your father and you being a father now, how do they compare and contrast?
That's a good question. I think they're similar in some ways. I think people, growing up in the 70s and 80s, parents they were not helicopter parents. At least there were very few helicopter parents, and they tended to let kick you out of the house and let you go roam and spend a lot of time outside. So I think that my father in particular was very involved with us because my two brothers and I were very involved in a ton of activities, whether it was athletics or music or all that kind of stuff. And he was always driving us places and going on. We were all big into cross country and track, so going to track meets and things like that, and taking us to soccer practice and doing all this kind of things. So he was involved and engaged, but never really pushed us. And I think I've sort of taken a similar tack if I look at it, which is I've not, I've tried to support both boys in doing what they want to do, but not push them to be what I want them to be. Let them sort of develop on that and support. And it's hard at this day and age because with, cell phones and everything else, the temptation is to track people everywhere they go. So one of the hard things is just, as they get up, letting them go off and be on their own and develop a little bit without letting them, completely crash and fall off the high beam, if you will.
You don't track them on your phone?
I could, but I do not. No, I feel like that's it, and I don't think you need to. I think it creates nothing but anxiety on the parent side and does not do anything to help build independence and self-confidence on the kids' side.
Are you paying for their cell phones still?
I am still paying for their cell phones, including the 23-year-olds, but only because I can add him as a line on my plan for really cheap, and it's just I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I told my kids when you want us to stop having the ability to look at your location, you start paying for that phone. Oddly enough, I'm still able to track where their location is.
I can do it, and if I ever need to, I could if I really needed to find them. But as a general matter, I don't. I do a little bit of the la 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 la. I don't want to know what's happening, and which is probably the better. Well, with the 23-year-old son, I don't need to know where he is because there's nothing I can do about it. He's actually a musician. He's playing in bands. He's touring all over the Southeast now. So
wow.
I'm just going to got to trust he'll be okay. The only reason I'm paying for the phone is because it would cost him a lot of money for him to get his own line compared to me paying $20 for it.
How do you break into the live fire world?
So I came into it from the academic side of things and from writing books. And I think without going into too much detail, I was in the computer business basically from 1997 and then moved down to Charleston in 2002 to get a job at Blackballed, which is a big software company here. And then sort of spent 20 years rising up the ranks, becoming an executive and then jumped to another technology company. So I spent a lot, and that's a pretty intense time, so I spent a lot of time just, building that professional career. But along the side of doing all that, I still kept an interest in reading and research and all that. And as I was getting through my PhD at South Carolina, I got much more interested in history than I did literature. So I started reading a lot of history. I was eating a lot of barbecue. I got really interested in old barbecue joints and was driving around and eating barbecue and a lot of other things, just sort of classic old restaurants. And so while I finished up my dissertation and got my PhD while I was working in the computer industry, but just as sort of a hobby, I said, well, what's my next project going to be? I wanted to work on some kind of research project is on the side. And so I said, I want to go to the library. I went to the University of South Carolina Library, which has millions of books, back a research library, and said, I'll find a book on history of barbecue and read that. That should be good. And there wasn't a book on the history of barbecue. The best I could find was, and I had spent a lot, many years doing very detailed historical research, more on the literary side of things. And so I started looking into it, and there have been people who had written books about like history of food with a couple pages on barbecue, and there have been some books written about like restaurants in the 20th century, but almost nobody had written anything about the 19th century barbecue. And I decided, well, I'll research into that more. So I started taking some of the same techniques I'd learned in studying literary history and started digging into culinary history, and discovered that there's a huge world of barbecue in the 19th century and back to the colonial era, and found more and more and more. And I said, okay, well, I guess I need to write that book. And it took me 10 years. It wasn't published until 2010. But I finally got it out there. Since then, a number of people have written additional barbecue histories, but that was the first book that treated it in depth, and the first book to really dig into the 19th century and 18th century. And so that sort of got me into culinary history. Along the way, as that book was finishing up, and it takes a while for it to go through the process, I started writing a food blog. This was after I'd moved to Charleston. Charleston has a great dining scene. I happened to move here right as that dining scene was really taking off and getting national and then international attention. And so I was just writing a food blog in the early days of blogs, back in the Blogger platform, back when you could do that. And actually, there was no Twitter at that point. There was no social media. But blogs were very exciting, and you could have conversations with people and share links and all that kind of stuff. And so I started writing this food blog. It's mostly about just restaurants and things I was eating. And then from that, I got in touch with the editor of the Charleston City paper got in touch with me and said, we need food writers, like your blog, you're interested in it. So I started writing some stuff for them, became one of their 2 restaurant critics, and then became their senior restaurant critic, reviewing restaurants here in Charleston. The barbecue book came out, and so I started writing more about barbecue, for the city paper here, but then for other publications. It just sort of grew organically, if you will, until Hunter Lewis, who at the time was the managing editor of Southern Living, and I sort of ran into each other. We were seated at the same table at a Charleston Wine and Food event here, and struck up a conversation. And he was like, "Well, you're trying to do more barbecue coverage at Southern Living. Maybe you like to write for us." And then, the rest, it sort of developed into the contributing barbecue editor gig, and that's sort of how I got into it.
Is that a contractor's position? The editor?
Yeah, for me now, and that's why it says contributing barbecue editor.
Yeah.
When they first had me come on board, Daniel Vaughn had just been hired as the barbecue editor at Texas Monthly. And I really wanted them to make me the senior barbecue editor at Southern Living, because I thought that'd just be a great way to really stick it to Daniel. But it turns out you can't do that, because if you're going to have that title, you have to be a full-time staff member. A barbecue editor.
Just for a title?
Yeah, the titles are very important in the journalism, in the world of journalism, in magazines, because they don't, there's not a lot else. Titles and plaques are very big. They're very big on reward ceremonies and things like that.
Not a lot of money.
So I couldn't. If you can't make money, you can at least get a nice plaque out of it. But so I couldn't be the senior barbecue editor, so I had to be the contributing barbecue editor, because that indicates that I'm not a full-time staffer. I am a freelancer, independent contractor. I just get paid per piece. But we have a regular gig, but I'm not I don't get a salary. I get paid each time I write something.
It's funny that both you and Daniel follow a similar track, in that his whole scene started around, I forget what the name was, Full Custom Gospel Barbecue.
Custom Gospel Barbecue. Yeah, he started off blogging. He was specifically barbecue, reviewing barbecue joints.
Yeah.
I was more general restaurants, talking about restaurants, but barbecue was among them. But yeah, and that was how a lot of people got into the business in 2005 to 2010, was through the blogging route.
How have you seen the journalism and writing world change over the time you've been doing it?
Yeah, I'll try not to get too despairing on it, because I think it's pretty bleak. It's changed for the worse, for sure. There was a short window of 20 years maybe where there was a lot of money in newspapers and magazines. This is before Craigslist, and so classified ads were just a hose full of money into your typical local newspapers. There was no Instagram. Brands advertised in magazines, full page, glossy photos. I mean, there was lots of money, revenue flowing in. At a time where there was a lot of consolidation in the industry. Most cities used to have 2, 3, 4 daily papers. They all consolidated until there was one. So there was this period where the local daily had a lock on the market. The magazines really were big, and you had your big brand magazines could really charge top rates, and then they could really afford to pay writers a lot of money. So, and then I got into it. It's curious that the blogs was sort of the route that Daniel and I and others have got into it, through that blogging route, because that was a way for you to sort of break into writing without having to actually get through the gatekeeper of an editor. I started submitting things well before I started doing the blog. I would write a piece and you'd submit it, and it would sit, you never hear anything back. And it was really hard to get published, the first time. Blogging lets you get up and sort of cut your teeth. They let a lot more people into the industry. And so at a time, it looked like, oh, this is this great new channel. It's going to let a lot of things into it. But then the step by step, the revenue model of newspapers and magazines has just been broken by the internet, or swiped away by the internet. And magazines and newspapers are all just really cutting corners and everything else. So the internet is a very difficult place. I think lots of newspapers and magazines have kept pivoting. They would pivot to video, they would pivot to this, they would pivot to that, as social media became the front door to the internet, and you had to break through the noise. And that's where clickbait and lists and all that stuff has come from. And the markets for paying, if you want to make money writing about food, it's harder and harder and harder, and the checks are smaller and smaller. So it's not something that I think there's a million content creators now around food, and there's not a whole lot of people making any money doing it. So it's not something I would consider a great career for people. It's a great hobby if you enjoy doing it. There's a great way to do it, but it's not a great way to pay a mortgage and raise a family and put them through school and all that good stuff.
Are you concerned with leaving any type of legacy behind you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you don't write stuff and launch it out in the world unless you want people to read it and you want to, them to sort of remember your name. To me, I think the books ultimately, hopefully, will be a legacy on the food writing side of things. I think that those are the things that will last the longest. I don't know how long the barbecue history or my Southern food histories will last, but they'll be relevant for a while. But I think it's I think it's less like a legacy in the sense that I want to be remembered and have like statues and things like that. But I would like to have something live after me that like a book on the shelf that someone down the road may pick up and read and find value in. That would be a nice legacy.
You've known him for a decent amount of time now as the 9:35 guest, the second Tuesday of the month, giving us great information on barbecue. And now you know way more about our pal Robert Moss, the origin story here as we come to conclusion. Robert, appreciate the time here this evening. Anything else you'd like to mention or promote as we head out of here?
Nothing to promote right now. Or mention. I do appreciate the ring and the guest Hall of Fame nod. That was very nice, and I do want to look forward to when I come back. Lots of thoughts coming back from the Jack and coming back, and then all the American Royal stuff about KCBS and barbecue competitions and all that. So yeah, not a subject for today, but maybe for December we can wait on that, because I've been thinking a lot about barbecue competitions in the past few weeks.
All right, we'll put that in for December's outline and some other things as well. This is our pal Robert Moss, robertfmoss.com, the website. Robert, appreciate the extended time tonight, and we'll see you in December.
All right. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
You got it. Robert Moss right there. And happy Thanksgiving, by the way, Ron. Great extended segment, yes, and we've learned a lot more about Robert than we ever knew before, which I certainly appreciate. All right, we're going to catch up here, hopefully, and do a nice top of the second hour intro. So stick around, and we'll be right back.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
And we thank Robert Moss for joining us last segment. robertfmoss.com is the website, a 2023 Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer. Yes, indeedy. One of what will be 4, hopefully, origin stories as we race through the next handful of months. Again, we don't do Rusty Monson because Rusty Monson did an origin story a couple of years ago when we first started rolling these out. So hopefully you enjoyed that extended peek into the world and life of our pal Robert Moss, second Tuesday of the month, regular guest in the 35 past the hour segment. All right, we are heading to the second hour where we have a great 60 minutes of barbecue-related content for you, amongst other things. So stick around, refresh your libations, and we'll be right back.
This is Steve, the Cookout Coach, and you're listening to the Barbecue Central Show.
You're listening to KCBS. All the barbecue hits. All the time. All the time. Or mostly on time.
And it's time for a KCBS weather break. It's currently 62 degrees outside. It might be 72 degrees. We're not exactly sure. Let me check. Ah, shit. We have no idea. So let's split the difference and go with 67. Yes, it's definitely 67 at KCBS. We think.
Happy to have you aboard here for the really big barbecue show.
We cook because we have to, and we grill because we want to.
Hit me!
Fine, how's it going?
You have a great show. I'm a big fan.
Boing.
So what seems to be the problem here? This man looks like he's dead, and he's in the crackle. Charbono! It's all about the charbono, dude!
Succulent fish. What?
He ate 54 wieners.
Now listen, Lavernius, shut your face.
I'm shaking like a dog shit peach seeds.
We have top men working on it right now. Top men.
And just like that, we are into the second hour of the Barbecue Central show, where we talk about the most important items of barbecue and grilling that are happening this day and age. The show coming to you live and direct, initially every Tuesday from 9 to 11. From the great city of Cleveland, Ohio. We know it as Bomb City, USA.
Bomb City, USA.
That's right.
Cleveland.
If you missed the first hour, shame on you. You missed a origin story with one Robert Moss, a new inductee to the 2023 Barbecue Central Show's Guest Hall of Fame class. Still to come on the show this evening. In about 12 minutes from now, Ryan... Pardon me. Just had a cat jump down my throat. Not literally a cat. Ryan Zboril from Pits and Spits going to be joining us. And Heath Riles of Heath Riles Barbecue will close out the show this evening. We say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of the video streaming platforms. You can go to Facebook and Twitch /BBQ Central Show. You can also watch through YouTube if you would care to, youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show. We also have a YouTube poll question of the week, and we will get you the update. And I'm asking everybody this. Even if money wasn't a factor, you prefer prime over Wagyu beef, yes or no? And currently 53% of you are saying no. You want the Wagyu. You want the main meat. We're not talking A5. Maybe that's the question for next week. Would you, if money's no object, you prefer A5 over Wagyu? But 53%, oh, just changed. 53% of you now are saying you prefer Wagyu over prime, even if money wasn't a factor. I prefer prime. Robert Moss prefers prime. We're in the 47% right now, but 53% taking it with the nose. Coming up on the best moments of the Barbecue Central show in 10 minutes or less this coming Friday, we bring you to episode 308. We're taking you all the way back to November 17th of 2009. That's 15 years ago almost, for crying out loud. Let's call it 14 years ago. Almost to the day. Will it be to the day? Tomorrow's the 15th. 16. So, 14 years ago to the day, you will have heard, perhaps, or maybe you remember, a guest by the name of Julie Reinhart of She Smoke fame. If you're a long time listener of the show, that might ring a bell as far as name is concerned? Julie Reinhardt. Made a few appearances on the show back in the day. She and her husband owned a barbecue restaurant out in the Pacific Northwest. I don't remember if it was Oregon. I think it was Washington State, if my memory serves me correctly, which it probably doesn't, as we're live here on the show. She also wrote a book entitled She Smoke, which went on to rave reviews from all the live fire fans out there. And in this segment, we talk about turkey preparation and turkey cooking, not in the oven. And since we're getting closer and closer to Thanksgiving, in fact, we are just a bit over a week away from Thanksgiving. This is going to be some great info for you to take in on Friday. If you're looking for some inspiration or if you're looking for some new thoughts. These aren't technically new thoughts since they're coming in from 2009, but if you're just new to the live fire game or scene, you're just strolling across Twitch tonight looking for online gamers, and instead you found me talking behind or in front of the great city of Cleveland, Ohio's backdrop, and you're now fancying yourself a live fire cook, but you don't know how to do turkey. The episode with Julie Reinhardt coming up on Friday is one you definitely want to check out. So be sure to subscribe to the show podcast feed, because that's the only way you can get best moments or replays, for that matter, of the show. You can subscribe by going to thebbqcentralshow.com/subscribe. You can do it a host of different ways. You can even do it by email if you don't want to use a podcast app, if you want to refuse technology almost to the fullest extent of the law, but you think email's all right. You can subscribe to the feed through email, and it'll get delivered to your inbox. As soon as the feed updates at some point later on, you get an email that says, here's the newest episode of the Barbecue Central Show. So you don't even have to think about it. Don't forget, if you want to hear a guest or segment again that you think's been lost in the archives of the show, which are now extensive, you can email our pal John Solberg, Jon, at thebbqcentralshow.com. Once again, it's Jon at thebbqcentralshow.com. Let him know what you would like to hear as far as a show topic or a guest, and he'll do his best to meet your expectation. It was the YouTube poll question of the week last week, and if I remember correctly, which again, I probably won't because we're live in show, I was asking you if you would try the Travis Kelce line of barbecue meals being sold exclusively at Walmart. I believe at the end it was no. Nobody was in on that. Rod Gray was completely off on it. I thought he was between Rod or Travis. I thought Travis was definitely a no. I thought Rod was a little bit on the potential waiver because he's a Chiefs fan, but equivocally and quickly he said no, he would not try it. But this was the story as it was released a couple days before the show on Tuesday last week from Fox, the numeral 4KC.com. From Kansas City, Missouri, by the way. Kansas City known for its delicious barbecue, and now a popular Chiefs player is taking his own twist on it. Travis Kelce making his way into the barbecue industry with a assortment of refrigerated entrees. Matt Osman is right, by the way. He's saying I asked if people would take the Jason Kelce. In my defense, Matt, super fan, you know I made the correction, by the way. I don't know why I said Jason Kelce last week. I was writing the question down on the outline, and it must mean I just have more of a kinship to Jason than I do Travis. Although, comparatively in the look scale, I'm definitely more of a Travis looker than I am a Jason. Anyway, Travis Kelce making his way into the barbecue industry with a new assortment of refrigerated entrees. Walmart is now carrying Travis Kelce's new line of refrigerated barbecue goods, all sold under the brand name Travis Kelce's Kitchen. The meals now available exclusively at Walmart. This guy, business keen, business savvy, sharp like a knife. Features 7 different meal options that take a KC-style approach to dinner. Here's a list of the entrees in case you haven't seen all the news articles that were written about it. bacon mac and cheese, a dish featuring jumbo macaroni noodles and a cheddar cheese sauce with pieces of bacon sprinkled throughout. Hypothetically, sounds really good. Then you have brisket, burnt ends, and barbecue sauce. No shocker here. KC known for the burnt ends. Burnt ends been widely popular over all the years I've covered this industry. So you get the taste of burnt ends, described as smoky and caramelized. Next entree, brisket burnt ends with mac and cheese. Not a shock there either. Sliced brisket and barbecue sauce. Oh, we're getting a little weird. I only hope that the sliced brisket and barbecue sauce, it's sauce on side. It's not all mixed in and then vacuum packed, frozen, where I have to reheat it with the sauce on it. I always prefer to have my brisket sauce on side. Then you have barbecue baked beans with sausage. You have a completely non-barbecue dish, sausage and meatball marinara with peppers and onions. Shout out to the Italians in the group. And then to culminate all of these meals, the barbecue baked beans with burnt ends. I've made baked beans, barbecue pit beans, whatever the hell you want to call them, for decades. And I always find that either a huge heavy hand of pulled pork goes really well in there, or leftover burnt ends, or leftover slices of brisket, especially if you jacked your brisket and it sucks. It does go really well in baked beans. So that's it's almost like a Brunswick stew of sorts, except it's baked beans and not Brunswick stew. So who's going to be the first to run on down to your local Walmart, peruse the freezer, because I can't imagine they're in the fresh section or refrigerated section? Did it say? Oh, these are refrigerated entrees, so that makes me now wonder even more. It can't be sauce on the sliced brisket refrigerated, right? It's got to be sauce on side. Let's hope for sauce on side. So who's going to be the first to race over to their local Walmart superstore and pick up a Travis Kelce entree and then send in a review on the show? If you do all of them, you can get a segment on the show. How about that? Eat all the Jason Kelce's Travis. You see, I did it again, Matt. I must really secretly have love for Jason Kelce, because it's not Jason, it's Travis. First person to go out and eat all of the Travis Kelce's Kitchen barbecue meals, you get a segment on the show. We'll do a review. In fact, you let me know well in advance. I'll get them all too, and we can have a back and forth. Sounds like a great idea. All right, Ryan from Pits and Spits is ready to go in the green room. Before we get to him, I'll talk to you about Big Papa Smokers. Listen up, gang. Our friends at Big Papa Smokers have something special just for you, listeners of the show. Whether you're a seasoned pit master or a grilling newbie, Big Papa Smokers, your one-stop online shop for all things barbecue. From their championship rubs, mouth-watering sauces, essential accessories, they've got what you need to take your food to the next level. Doesn't matter if you're on the competition trail or in your own backyard. Great times for both. Here's the cherry on top. Big Papa Smokers is offering the listeners of the Barbecue Central Show an exclusive deal. Use promo code REMPE, R-E-M-P-E, at checkout, and you get $10 off your next $50 purchase of rubs, sauces, or essential accessories. Imagine the possibilities. Evaluate your ribs with Big Papa's Sweet Money. Or add Big Papa's Desert Gold on top of your chicken. Or better yet, pick up Big Papa's Double Secret and put it on your steak. Head on over to BigPapaSmokers.com and start shopping and saving today. And don't forget to use promo code REMPE, R-E-M-P-E, at checkout to claim your $10 off your next order of $50 or more. We love free on this show. Don't forget to check out Big Papa's full line of recipes at cookingwithbigpapa.com. And, of course, make sure you're following them on all kinds of social media. Ryan Zboril up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
Well, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by pitbarrelcooker.com, the most unbelievable outdoor cooking device on the planet. Currently available in 3 sizes with a host of accessories if you're into the barrel cooker scene. Doesn't matter if you're a beginner or professional. It's a cooker you want to add to the arsenal regardless. Pitbarrelcooker.com. And they do have the PBX deal going on as well. Just mention that. You heard it on the show, and they'll give you the PBX deal. If you mention, they'll know what you're talking about. My first guest in the second hour manufactures some of the best offset pit, pellet smokers, charcoal grills, and other live fire products available in the market today. They have been a loyal sponsor all year long, which we certainly appreciate. Ryan Zboril from Pits and Spits joining the show. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Greg.
We have a YouTube poll question of the week that supersedes any other business and live fire stuff that we're talking about here, and we're asking all guests and everybody watching on YouTube, and it's this. Even if money was not a factor, you prefer prime beef over Wagyu beef, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Well, it seems the guests and your host tonight are erring on the minority side, where 47% of us are saying that even if money wasn't a factor, we do prefer prime over Wagyu beef. But 53% of people are saying, no, doesn't matter. We want the best grades possible. You know, it's not that I'm a meat snob by any stretch, and I've had all the ranges of beef. But for me, prime seems to hit just the very best flavor profiles and mouthfeels and unctuousness. And sometimes, depending on what brand of Wagyu you're getting, it can be a little over the top. I'm not talking like A5 over the top where you have 5 or 6 slices and you're like, okay, that's it. But even the Wagyu can become a little toothy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of those that it has its place, but it's almost I don't even want to say that prime is less, but it's like less is more, like kind of like very, very good is almost the enemy of perfect in that scenario, right? It's like, I get it that Wagyu is technically better, but that doesn't mean I want to eat a 12-ounce Wagyu ribeye, right? And like, if I'm gonna treat myself to a nice steak, like I kind of want a lot of it, you know. And I don't want that. I just don't want that overly richness, right? I mean, it's kind of like a dessert, right? Kind of like one of those death by chocolate type desserts where it's great for the first couple of bites, but if I'm gonna get a giant piece, I want to eat as much of it as I can without feeling sick.
Yeah, that's why I think I like apple pie or something a little lighter on the desserts. I'm not really much of a sweet guy anyway, but all right. So we agree on the steak, which is great. Like-minded individuals sticking together. So let's start with some business talk here tonight, Ryan. We're getting close to the end of 2023. If you look back from January to where we're sitting at, almost closing out the year, how does this year end up for you, especially compared to the last couple?
I think this year ends up on a positive note. I think for us, going into it, we expected a year very similar to kind of the last 3 quarters of last year. I think 22 was a big wake up call. That was kind of the inventory reckoning of the industry, and it allowed us to kind of reset and say, look, we're gonna get back to running lean, and it's really a reset back to where the industry and business used to be. I mean, you got to try and sell now. You got to have a marketing plan. You got to talk to dealers. You got to answer the phone with customers when customers call. You got to try and engage people. It's no longer kind of the 2020, 2021. Look, guys are calling around. If they can find a grill, they're buying it. Or, dealers coming out of the woodwork that you've never heard of before. Hey man, we just need some stock, some inventory. It's 100% back to like the brands have to sell and actually be a brand.
So it's amazing that you're talking about this, because I just had a day job sales meeting a couple days ago where we've been under this, what they call dealer allotment. So I'm capped at how many trucks I could sell during the course of a year for the last couple of years. And all of a sudden, those restrictions really start to feel like they're going to be falling off. Peterbilt doesn't want to say it, but we all kind of know it. And we're being told how we should just act as there is no allotment, go back out. It's easy to talk about, but was it hard to say, yeah, we do have to do that? And it's real easy to sit on the fat cat side of things. And then when you got to go back out and be aggressive again, it might take a little bit more to get motivated to want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's humbling is the thing, right? Is that you want to believe that you are that good, or that you have that much momentum, or that many people know about you, or you've kind of penetrated the market, and to kind of look at yourself and say, look, man, like, right or wrong, you got to get back to basics and just do the basic stuff right, to make it work for everybody. And so it's, I feel like we adjusted to that pretty early on, but there's always that part of you holding out hope that, like, oh man, like maybe this is next quarter, it's going to become easy again, or it's maybe next year, next month. And you eventually, and I think really kind of towards the back half of this year, we really just said, look, man, like, easy's done. And so it's back to really kind of focusing on the model, focusing on what works, what makes financial sense, right? It's kind of, you can be aggressive in certain spots, but you can't be lazy.
When you look back over the results that we were talking about for this year, was there anything that stuck out as being surprisingly good or surprisingly bad?
I think on the surprisingly good side, we saw really positive reception with some of our charcoal grills and some of the influencer initiatives we ran there. I mean, that was really neat to see. And our stainless line continues to be really strong, and just to see that do well in the coastal areas, which makes a lot of sense for us considering we are a coastal state. So all those were all positive. I think from a bit of a surprising side, we saw some of our lower priced items like our 850, kind of our $2,000, what we'll call kind of entry level pellet grill line or pellet grill segment, kind of lagged. And I think that's just a function of the economy, inflation, kind of all the headwind type stuff that you hear in the news. And it really makes sense to me also when you start looking at a grill. You could pay $2,150, or you could, pay $2,700, and you're going to get something that's, almost 50% larger and about the same footprint. So it does make sense, but I think that you do kind of start to separate yourself from the more commoditized grills out there.
How are you gearing up for the first half of 2024?
We are just kind of sticking to the playbook. We think that kind of our 1250 is going to continue to be our cleanup hitter in the lineup. We're going to keep pushing our charcoal grills, like I mentioned, also with the stainless. And then I know I mentioned this last time I was on the show, we finally have kind of a path to market with our built-in pellet grill, which we expect to be out in the first quarter next year. And then we also have a gas griddle/grill kind of flat top combo product that's going to be our first real venture into the gas market of any significant effort in probably 10 years. And so I think those are going to help us diversify, help us kind of fill out the portfolio, and then also give us a chance at some repeat customers, right? I mean, I think people might not expect it, but we actually do have quite a few repeat customers. And I think that if someone's building a house, or they're moving, or they're interested in that Blackstone, or they're interested in some type of flat top or gas grill type product, I think they're going to give us a look at that. And it's going to be full stainless, high, kind of in the higher end of the market, where we don't see a lot of action. So that's kind of our plan, is to do what we do well, but then also try and fill in spots in the market where we see holes, or where we think we can have a nice fit and kind of not have a ton of commoditized competition.
Did you have a gas grill out 10 years ago?
Years ago, not with any scale, right? So this is back when Pits and Spits was probably 90% custom trailers, but we did make gas grills. They were only available direct. There was never at that time there was no dealer network or anything anyway. So, but we do have experience in gas grills. A lot of it's kind of at that time what we called the hybrid. So an offset smoker with a couple burners in it, so you could offset smoke charcoal grill or gas grill. And then even 30 years ago, kind of the original, the founders of the company had some pretty neat little gas grill products they came out with. And man, those things are still around. We still get calls with people that have, it's pretty interesting. They'll call and they'll say, man, I bought this 30 years ago and it would cost me $800. Yeah, I want to get it fixed up. I'm like, wow, dude, like get that fixed is going to cost you $1,500, and it's almost they almost fall out of their chair at that. And it's interesting how that kind of that 1990s number is stuck in their head at the value or kind of what that product should cost. I'm like, dude, gas grills from China cost $2,500. So yeah. I mean, this is still pretty good.
Have you thought about? I remember I had Joe Davidson on Oklahoma, the original Oklahoma Joe, and so. Originally, he was making offset pits. He tells the great story about how he goes out to the state fair with like 20 pits, doesn't think he's going to sell one, sells all 20, and then leaves with an additional order of like 200. And now he's stuck having to fill all these orders that he didn't anticipate and builds this huge company, ends up selling it, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, he started to go back and track down those original first 100 or 200 Oklahoma Joe offset pits that he built, started buying them back, and he was sticking them in a barn. And he has a number of them, and I know he's always still on the lookout. Have you ever thought about, like, so if this guy calls you and says he has this little gas grill and say, hey, how about this? I'll give you $800 back, and I'll buy that gas grill and start building some kind of a Pits and Spits museum of sorts for the older stuff.
We do kind of do that. So we have some of the original, some of the kind of first stick burners from close to 40 years ago, kind of squirreled away at the shop. We will give credit for these older units if they want to buy a new one. I mean, we don't always. I mean, there are times where we will see something really interesting and say, $500. You're looking to get rid of it. We'll give you a scrap value for it.
Yep.
A lot of that because we have welders that have been with us for, I want to say 30 years. Like it's crazy how long some of these guys have been with us. Those units will come back in. We'll refurbish them, and then those guys want them. They want to, they'll work a couple extra hours, and that's like the compensation for it. And it's like, yeah, look, you were 20 years old when you built this thing the first time. Of course, like I think that there's a lot of sentimental value there. So we definitely see a lot of these units coming back in, and they end up kind of finding a new home within the P&S family, which is I think pretty neat.
From a material standpoint, are you seeing any slow up on anything in particular, or are they readily available?
No, materials are looking good. We did get a notice from our carbon supplier that there's going to be what's pretty much a 10% increase coming down the pipe, with the potential for another 10% after that. Again, kind of unexplained, just the mills want to do it type deal. There's no real. I think the auto workers strike somehow was used as cover fire for that, but I'm like, they just went back to work, so they need that steel. Anyway, I don't know. So I don't know, that's part of the headline that those guys put out there. But then we've seen a lot of easing in the stainless market, which has been really nice. Nickel's coming down, and so we for the first time since 2020 got material that was under $2 a pound. So that was really nice to see. So it's, we never like to see an increase, but for the most part, things have been stable. And I think after, going through what we went through in 21 and 22 with the complete ramp in materials and kind of scarce, I don't want to say we're more prepared for it because all sorts of crazy stuff can happen, but I don't think we would necessarily be as caught off guard as we were. I mean, that was such a shock to the system that you were really just fulfilling orders at whether or not you were making money, right? This is kind of your thinking, well, I got to stay in business, so I got to fulfill this. And I think we'd be a little more disciplined now because we would know that there would be light at the end of the tunnel.
Let me circle back to the gas grills here just for a second. What kind of a line or lines would you have?
So right now we're contemplating a 4 and 5 burner setup. So probably a 5 burner is going to be kind of the 36 to 38 inches wide. 4 burner is going to be more of that 32, 34 inch wide, which is actually a lot of BTUs for those sizes. So, I mean, there are 25,000 BTUs of burner. So you're looking at 75 to, what was that, 50,000? 4 times 25?
100,000.
100,000. Yeah. Sorry. My math is not very, I didn't know we were doing math tonight. Anyways, they're pretty high BTU output units. So we want them to get hot fast and, and be fun to use and easy to use. Again, I think we want to make sure we're thoughtful and careful about it, and that we're differentiating ourselves. And so we're going to be using heavier material, right? We're talking like 12 gauge stainless, and it's kind of the typical Pits and Spits deal where it's all welded and it's all, it weighs a couple 100 pounds or a few 100 pounds. And it's not like we don't use bending and rivets to kind of give us the structure that a lot of these lighter end gas grills do, right? Like it's like you could drop this off the back of your truck and you wouldn't really, you may get a scratch, but you're not going to bend it up.
Yeah.
And so that's our approach to it. And I think we want it to be dual use. So we want it to be a very good griddle and a very, very good griddle and a very good grill. So it may not be a, the leader of the pack in the market in either of them, but we want it to be kind of top 3, top 5 in both functions.
I'm seeing this pop up in the instant chat from a couple different folks. I probably know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Are you building the gas grill, or are you bringing stuff in and just assembling in Texas?
So the burners and valves we purchase from a gas grill company that we have a relationship with, but as so far we've built them at our shop. I mean, it's kind of our typical stuff, right? And if we build it in house, and if we were to have it third party to have portions of it done third party, we have a production partner here in Houston that has a 100 or 150,000 square foot facility that they can actually help us augment our production. So it's 10 miles from our shop. If we need to contract it out, but that would be based on demand and volume. And so we're a long ways from that, but that is something we had to figure out during COVID, kind of in like a doomsday scenario of if all of our guys are shut down, how do we grow, or I'm sorry, how do we exist? And so we have those guys as a domestic and Texas option, in Houston, Texas specifically option. But we're planning to do it in-house.
Let's make sure that whenever that get ready to launch, we have you back on so we can talk about it. And then, of course, any other new stuff that you have coming on, love to have you back in. Ryan Zboril joining us here on the show. You can go to pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central Show and check out everything that they have to offer. Ryan, always appreciate the time here, and we will talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
We got it. Ryan Zboril from Pits and Spits. And yes, I mean, as soon as I hear gas grill, now maybe some of you purists are wanting to take a dump all over that, but I'm like, let's bring on the great gas grills, not the cheap gas grills, but I'm okay with a great gas grill. Pits and Spits is going to bring, no pun intended, the heat when it comes to the gas grill stuff. And for those of you wondering, this isn't a Chinese parts shipped in and then they're putting it together. This is American-made stuff. It's Pits and Spits, man. Heath Riles is in the green room. He's ready to go. Before we get to him, Talking to you about Franklin barbecue pits. Also, all American made, right? The backyard version of the famed pits built by Aaron Franklin for his renowned barbecue restaurant in Austin, Texas, Franklin Barbecue. Built for those barbecue purists who want to take their craft to the next level. What you have with the Franklin pit is a deeply thought out and refined version of the old propane style cookers that Aaron builds for Franklin Barbecue. Stylistically, it reflects the kind of bare bones, industrial, handmade aesthetic that he loves, as in the patina and the way the build allows you to see the welds and the craftsmanship. Now, the schematics of a Texas offset, relatively simple. I think we can agree on that. Even if what's happening inside reflect complicated dynamics of physics and chemistry. Very few moving parts, numerous and massive differences, however, that divide the Franklin pit from a lot of the other stuff in big box stores. Cheap smokers made from thin metal. Not only does cheap material tend to warp and crack when sustained that kind of heat, need to make great briskets, but especially on a cold day, the thin metal just sheds heat, struggles to maintain a consistent temperature. The Franklin pit made of 5/16 and quarter-inch American-made steel that's strong. Anything that sees heat, engineered to be incredibly solid and should last a century or more, cared for properly. Franklin pits can be found at barbecue specialty stores in select regions of the country. If you, the listener, are an owner of such a store and you wish to become a certified Franklin dealer, visit the website franklinbbqpits.com and fill out the dealer form. If you, the listener, want to own a Franklin barbecue pit and you are in a part of the country that doesn't offer a certified Franklin dealer nearby, you can offer and view them at franklinbbqpits.com for purchase. By the way, and this never happens, Franklin barbecue pits on promotion. Save up to $400 between now and the end of the year if you purchase a Franklin barbecue pit from either a certified Franklin dealer or from Franklin's website, franklinbbqpit.com. That's right. Save $400. So go to the certified dealer, say, just listening to the Barbecue Central show, and they said I get $400 off of this one on the floor, or send them an email over on the website. Make sure you're saving your $400. $400. I like to save $400 free dollars. I'm sure you do too. Once again, the website, franklinbbqpits.com, and save $400 now until the end of the year. So just under a month. We're going to revisit with Heath Riles in just 1 second. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Whole packers, full racks, legs and thighs, injecting butts. If you've never heard this before, you might think you found the best XXX show ever. Let's get back to the most homoerotic host out there today, Greg Rempe.
And we thank Ryan Zboril for joining us the last segment. Pitsandspits.com. Helping me close the show tonight is a guy who's been around the barbecue game a long time. Many consider him to be one of the best competition pitmasters out there. He has seen success at Memphis in May, Memphis Barbecue Network, Kansas City Barbecue Society, and others. Also, a successful line of barbecue products, growing YouTube channel. Also has a barbecue podcast called Shooting the Q, which can be found on all podcast platforms. Certainly, I'm talking about Heath Riles. Heath, we have a YouTube poll question of the week that I want to ask you before we get into the rest of the stuff here this evening. And I'm asking everybody this. Even if money was no factor, you would prefer prime over Wagyu beef, yes or no?
I would used to say I preferred Wagyu, but now I think I prefer prime.
All right. Well, minute over minute, it seems to be pressing back to almost 50-50. But currently, the YouTube voting public at 53% says no, they would not prefer prime over Wagyu. They would like to take the Wagyu. 47% of us, I'm with you, by the way. All guests, by the way, tonight have said they would prefer prime over Wagyu. Anything in particular? Is it just, can it get a little too much?
Yes, a little too much, a little too fatty. Meaning as in, I actually stopped eating red meat for about 8 months when
You
I was
did?
diagnosed with diverticulitis. Yes,
Oh, wow.
and so that was a couple years ago, and I actually lost about 100 pounds. Um, and so I've kind of been dieting ever since, and I try to watch my red meat intake. But the Wagyu, I can tell you, does kind of, I'm not going to say mess with my stomach, but I know when I eat it.
A lot has changed since the last time you were on the show, Heath. I believe it was March of 2016 since last we spoke, if you can believe it. You've gone through an entire rebrand, had a really good look at winning Memphis in May 2 years ago with ribs, no less. Started a YouTube channel and a podcast. So let's talk all about it. And let's run it back a bit. Start with the rebrand. I had a number of people that heard the promotion you were going to be on the show tonight, and we're like, oh, we want to know the story of what happened to Victory Lane and why you go into Heath Ryle's barbecue. So let's start there. Why the rebrand?
Honestly, it was just time. I developed all these products and had them out, and my partner at the time, or so-called partner, he liked to live a different lifestyle. He partied a lot, and that's kind of the common thing in the Memphis barbecue area here, right? And so I just wanted to get more serious about it, and his far-fetched ideas kind of just got way more out there. I did not want to get into the restaurant business, and he did. I had done some restaurant stuff before, just as a managing partner on some ventures and some barbecue stuffs, and always sold rub to restaurants over the last 20 years. And it's just not something I want to do. He wanted to go a different route than I did, so I took my products and rebranded them under my name. And I was actually in the middle of rebranding, and I seen Famous Dave and Sweet Baby Ray in Chicago, and they convinced me to change it to my name. And it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
Why didn't you start out as Heath Ryle's barbecue?
Why didn't I?
Yeah.
Honestly, didn't have the finances at the time. And at the time, I mean, I could have went really small. And I had somebody that said they would pay all the bills and everything else if we could just not call it my name. And that was kind of hard to walk away from. I'll be honest, especially as expensive as things had gotten, cooking Memphis in May and things like that.
How big of a task is the rebrand itself?
Well, for me, I had all my products down pat, so it was just honestly redoing the labels was the hardest part. And it took about 8 weeks of constant redesign and tweaking and moving and, just all that kind of stuff with logos. And then the thing after that was getting the website built. And so that, of course, was a headache in itself. And, we have a good website now, but it's like everybody's website. You're always wanting to do more and more and more to it.
I assume you end up divorcing the partner, and you got to tell them, hey, I'm not only am I leaving, but I'm taking all these great products away too. Was there any animosity at that point, or was it a pretty amicable breakup?
Yes, it was. It started out like it was, but he very soon found out that he did not have any of the recipes, that all the NDAs were in my name, he didn't come up with anything and do any of that. And so he was just, had the crazy notion that would be his. So he's tried to do some catering and stuff like that. And I think he's got a little catering spot, but he don't work it himself. He's not that type of guy. He's not a worker.
Have you seen quantifiable results after the switch, or was it more to have branding consistency over time as you also would introduce new products?
It was a pretty easy conversion because everybody kind of knew who I was anyway and knew me. I mean, in the beginning, I never built a team Facebook page up. I always posted on my personal page, and that was nothing. I wasn't meaning to do that or anything like that. It's just the way that it turned out. And I'm kind of glad that it did. And I actually had to turn down Barbecue Pit Masters in the middle of all that. I was in Hollywood filming a commercial for Bank of America then that we got casted on. And so all of it kind of worked out good. I'm glad that I didn't go on that show now under a different name.
Yeah, right, because that could have been a whole situation because that stuff gets replayed to this day.
It does. It was actually on earlier, and I was sitting there thinking about that, you know, a lot of people are still getting paid off of that show.
How many products do you have for sale right
now? Currently 22, and come December the 4th, it will be 25.
Wow, adding 3.
3. We're coming out with a line of glazes. I've made them for about the last 8 years, 7, 8 years in contests, glazing up whole hogs and shoulders and ribs. And finally, I've decided to finally launch them after enough people and enough interest. And now that we've built up big enough brand that I feel like we needed to add them to the portfolio.
What's the most popular product in the line right now?
It goes back and forth. We really don't have a set. It goes back and forth between like 3 or 4 products, believe it or not, and they're all dry rubs. Be my garlic jalapeno, garlic butter, my competition rub, or my honey rub.
Do you sell those as like the popular package? Are they like a combo anywhere on the website?
We do have some combos on there, and we've got some build your own bundles where you save money. And really the garlic butter and garlic jalapeno, the all-purpose type rubs have really been I say the leaders of the pack. The barbecue rubs really perform well during the key months of barbecue season, but a lot of people use the garlic butter and garlic jalapeno at home every day. It's not just your weekend rub.
Out of the 22, soon to be 25 products, have there also been ones that have seen their day in the sun but have since gone into retirement? You've removed them from the offering portfolio?
No, I have not removed anything yet.
Oh.
I've not. Everything's been pretty decent. If I could honestly pick on anything, it would probably be my hot rub. I probably shouldn't have called it hot rub. It's more of just a good all-purpose barbecue rub. It's really not spicy at all. Got a little bit of heat to it, but that's really the only, I'm not going to say regret, something that I shouldn't have named that. Should have changed that.
Can you rename it?
Yeah, and I will eventually. I think I will. And of course, I'm not going to say that I won't end up dropping a couple more because it's gotten to the point now all about volume. And if you're not moving multiple truckloads a year, it's kind of not worth me messing with. You know.
How's that butter bath and soak doing?
It's right up there with those other 4 products, to be honest with you. Being it's one of the only products like that in the country. You know, a dehydrated version of your normal rib wrap stuff, basically, and you reconstitute it. You know, in Memphis, I tried to develop something. I really got hot and heavy on ribs, and we were cutting all the ribs down to about 12 bones and weighing them and getting them down to, 2 3/4 pounds exactly. And so I wanted to be really consistent. And every time you go to grab a handful of brown sugar or squeeze honey, you never did know how much you were doing. So I developed that product to be sure that I was only putting like 3/4 of a cup per slab, and I was going to have consistent flavor throughout. And it just I feel like it made me a better cook.
That's easily the most impressive product I have seen anybody do. I don't know if I've seen anybody look around. Everybody's got a rub, a glaze, this and that. There's a lot of similarities amongst lines depending on whoever your favorite is. You can typically find something that's comparable to whatever this guy's got or that guy's got. But I don't know anybody else that has this butter bath that you thought about. And I've tried it many times, big fan. And you're right. I just did ribs on Sunday, and I'm grabbing a handful of this and a squeeze of this. And I'm sure one rack to the next rack wasn't nearly as consistent as it could have been if I would have used the butter bath. I mean, it's just any reason why nobody else is on that? Like, do you have that IP locked down in fear of law or suing?
I mean, I do have some stuff locked down, but at the end of the day, when it comes to recipe development, there really is no key to locking anything up. As you know, anybody can run out here and say, "Oh, I have the best rub. And, sales really don't say that. So anybody can go out to a co-packer, to most co-packers, and have something match. But at the end of the day, they're going to charge you more for it. You're not going to be able to have a good margin with it. And we see every day a person come out with a new rub and a new product, or a new barbecue team launch a new rub after we know they've used somebody else's rub all season long. And you see what they do. They go out and try to match those 3 rubs they've been using, of different people to create their own. Nothing wrong with that. But a lot of people don't understand that's a long road to get to where a lot of us are at.
So what's been the growth strategy for you in the business over the last 5 years?
Honestly, don't pay any attention to what anybody else is doing. Put my head down and just go to work. And we work 5 and 6 days a week sometimes. And we try to put out a video every week, and we have for the last, 4 or 5 years, consistently every week. And then we added the podcast kind of last year. And so that putting out 2 pieces of content. And then I started adding a piece of short form that started putting out 3 pieces of content, and it just kept snowballing, and I kept adding to the team. And now we're up to 10 employees, and trying to interview to hire more, and it's just been a incredible ride. And if I had to document the whole thing, I don't know if I could, because it's happened, with me really not paying attention to everything.
What are the big accounts that you get into? I mean, if you're hiring, or if you have a staff of 10, 11, 12, whatever it is, and you're doing something right, but what have been the key successes to help you continue to build and continue to make a small business of your own?
Well, I was in the beer business in my previous career, and I was there almost 13 years. And doing that and working with some of the grocery stores and being involved with some of the negotiation tactics and some of the deals, like I handled all of Beale Street, which is all the bar side.
Yeah.
And just being able to negotiate those types of deals with those types of people and sit in boardrooms at a younger age and, network with certain types of people. I think that it made it easier for me to be able to deal with some of these people that I deal with now. And where a lot of people go out and use a lot of brokers to go out and sell their product, I am the salesman. I mean, with my name on the bottle, it's not hard when you're talking to me and, a Kroger buyer or a Walmart buyer or whatever, comes that has questions. It's real easy to answer those.
The way I understand it, or the way some folks have regaled me with story on their success, and they're using brokers, is you're foregoing what you're doing in order to team up with a broker because they have the connections. So am I understanding correctly saying maybe you're luckier, or not luckier, but you just happen to have business connections that a lot of these other folks don't, so you can leverage them that way, also keep your margin with you doing it direct versus having to bring on a broker in order to get these introductions made?
That's right. And we go out all the time, and we let the numbers do the talking, is what I like to say. Now that we've been in retail for about 5 years, in certain accounts, and we usually have gained at 1 to 2 big accounts every year. We just picked up Lowe's National back last year. We just closed Schnucks, just got their first order. I'm looking over at my board over here. Ingles be the first of the year. I mean, I've got a whole list of store chains. Some has reached out to us, some we've reached out to. And in the past few months, I've just hired a VP of sales, and she's doing very well so far with some of the people she knew. And we do have a couple brokers that work for us, but it's just in situations to where the retailer makes you use a broker.
Where do you see the rub and products business in the next couple of years?
The way I have it lined out right now, easily double to triple where we're at, if we continue to do our job. And I guess what I mean by that is we have to continue to put out videos. We have to continue to put ourselves in front of people in the uncomfortable positions to sell that product. And I like to tell people it's easy to get it on the shelf. It's harder to get it off the shelf. Just because somebody sees it in a store, if they don't know your brand, you really have to be hitting on all cylinders. And right now we're hitting on YouTube, of course, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, uh, everything we can to try to sell some rub.
When you talk about YouTube, talk about podcasts, let's start with YouTube first. Are there any folks that were inspirational to you or that maybe you even model your style after in order to see the YouTube success?
I've been friends with Malcolm since, oh Lord, in the late 90s, I guess, is when we met one another. And Ben's, we've always lived within 20 minutes of each other. And we've always seen each other and hung out and been great friends. And so seeing Malcolm do the videos and the barbecue pit guys and seeing other brands do that, and being involved with it in BBQA over the years and everything else, it was when we started really selling rubs and developed our own website, I knew that we had to start doing videos. That was the only way we were going to sell product. And we started out just me and my wife, and honestly went over to Malcolm and Rochelle's, and Rochelle taught my wife how to edit the videos and all that kind of stuff, give her kind of a crash course on it, in a couple hours. And it's been downhill ever since. Now we have editors on staff and video people on staff and all that. And so all I do is show up and gather all the ingredients up and go to cooking, and they film it.
What about on the podcasting side? Why do you decide to get into that?
Well, I'm not going to say I was burned out on doing cooking videos, but it's kind of hard to put out that amount of cooking videos a week that you really need to have your face seen. And so I'm a really big, I love talking to people and hearing people's stories, kind of like you do. And so I thought if I started a podcast and just kind of me be me and just kind of pull on certain guests and talk about their competition barbecue or their business or whatever, it would just be fun. And so far, my wife is kind of, after the first couple of podcasts, she's kind of joined on there, and she's a really shy person, which is really shocking until she's had a couple drinks in her, and then she's pretty good,
Yep.
So I tell anybody, if you watch a podcast that we filmed at 9:30 in the morning versus one after lunch, you can see two different people there. She's a lot more open and engaging, and so we're still learning, and we're just having fun is basically all we're doing. And so being able to gather, I don't know who told me this, but said you could get over 20 pieces of short form content off of one podcast.
Sure.
And so when I was told that, I was like, okay, we're starting a podcast, order the equipment. It was just that whim of a decision. I threw my credit card on the desk, my social media manager, and he ordered everything off Amazon, and we just went to, doing it. And now we've had to buy better equipment and steady change out stuff as we go. And I'm sure you know how that is. It's a growing business for sure.
What's the hardest challenge doing a podcast?
Trying to make sure you keep your listeners engaged, asking the right questions to your guests, and trying to be, I guess, somewhat funny at the same time.
Being entertaining?
That's right. That's exactly right.
What's the biggest mistake people are making at home cooking briskets?
Pulling it too soon. I mean, I feel like are not resting it long enough. I think that's a mistake a lot of us make, and it's not just competition barbecue people. Everybody's always in a rush to eat, right? We all know that. And I think that's why hot and fast has gotten so popular over low and slow, because everybody's in a hurry in today's society. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but we're all just so busy. And so I done a cooking video today with a prime rib, and I had to let it rest 30 minutes before I sliced it. It was just one of those, if I don't, I knew what the reaction was going to be. And it's kind of like those brisket, the longer you hold it, the better it's going to get.
What's the bigger news item in 2023? Memphis and May leaving Tom Lee Park and the associated damage charges that went along with it, or the scoring fiasco at this year's American Royal?
I'm going to say that would be a hard one to call, and I'm probably going to catch some grief for this. But I would probably say the KCBS scoring fiasco, because the Memphis in May thing is not it wasn't new to me. I knew what was going to happen.
Oh, really? Wait, hold on. Now, hold on a second. It sounds like you might have an inside track here, so let me ask a question. You're just speculating. Let's get all the legal stuff out of the way. From what I read and understand, and I've been covering this thing ad nauseum because at least from the Memphis River Parks partnership point of view, they were pretty free in giving out information when they were asked for it. And the way I understood it, and the CEO of MRPP actually replied back to a post of mine on LinkedIn when I said, well, why would you build a park that obviously seems like it's going to be no use for a barbecue contest and could only sustain substantial damage given the way it was done? And she replied back and said, what you don't understand is Memphis in May Festival was brought in on this. Their operations guy sat in on the planning. Everything was built per their spec. And this is what they have. So this is not something that should be new to them. They were the ones that wanted it like this. Does that sound right?
No, that don't sound right to me. You've got everybody from Memphis in May that's been in Memphis their whole life, and you have Carol Coletta that's a St. Louis resident that lives in Memphis that was hired to do a job here. And so that's just I don't know the lady, never met her. I think I seen that post on LinkedIn, to be honest. But I'm not going to say I have an inside at Memphis in May, but I worked downtown for many years in the beer business. And so I have a lot of insight and a lot of friends down there, planning commissions and things like that, right? Yeah. And there's no way feasible for everything they've done to the park for it to ever hold a contest of Memphis in May magnitude in the proper way again. And my in-laws' best friend works for an engineering firm. And so Memphis River Parks actually, and they may not ever admit this, done the plans wrong and done all the manhole covers and everything. Had to bring in fresh dirt to raise them up over 2 foot.
Whoa. Like
a month before the contest. So like there were spots down from me. Used to the pass in there were probably 12 foot wide. They're down to 8 foot wide now, 7 foot wide. You can barely get a truck and big trailer down through there. And as soon as you backed off the sidewalk, Memphis River Parks had a person there with a camera taking pictures. And I was the second team in the park that day, and they were laying down boards to back the trailers on the grass with forklifts. It took forever. It took like 6 hours to load 8 teams in, the first 8 teams at Memphis in May.
Wow.
MMRP knew that they were going to give Memphis in May those damage deposits like that because they had people there taking pictures from the get-go. And when you fill dirt up a month prior, 2 foot, and try to back a 30,000-pound trailer off of it, you know it's going to sink up to the axles.
Yep.
Nobody's ignorant. And you go to ripping water lines out when you do that, and flowers and bushes, and it just – I mean, I really hate it for the city it not been on the river anymore, but it's time for a change. And the Tiger Lane, in my aspect, is probably the best place for it. When it leaves the river, especially since they're building, I think 3 hotels right over there by it. And I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I've got to cook it no matter if it's on the river or in Tiger Lane Park or in the damn street up here. I'm going to be there cooking it. It don't matter.
Is it sustainable there? Will it eventually go to some new forever home? I've heard it's potentially unsavory neighborhood over there.
You know, Memphis has, over the last 20 years, they would develop one section of the city and then they would kind of push riffraff out to another part of the city. And that's what they're doing in that area now, trying to push that again on up. And if you go back and look at everything, kind of how they went around the 240 loop here around Memphis, and they've just now kind of pushed it all to that area has been contained. Now they're trying to push it on out. Now it kind of butts right up to it. It's a bad area because the University of Memphis College is right next door. So it's not that bad of an area, right? And it's you lose the river, the feel of the river, but as far as your equipment not getting dirty and muddy and walking along hill, and the only feedback that I've given them so far, I hope that they don't do one entrance and one exit for the teams because the Tiger lane is so big, they could have multiple entrances and exits. And that's really the only feedback I've given them. Other than that, I just need to know who to send my check to.
Heath Riles is going to be making a run for Memphis in May in 2024, of course. And were you happy to see the rib streak finally get broken? Certainly you would have rather broken the streak yourself, but I mean, as a rib guy, you happy to see that happen?
I'm very happy to see it happen. And, it couldn't have happened to a better person. And he was actually using my butter bath, believe it or not.
Of course.
And John Wheeler, partners with Melissa Cookston and
Yeah,
Memphis Barbecue Company. And John has almost won that thing with rib. He almost beat Melissa by 1/1000th of a point. She beat him. I think it was 2018, 19, somewhere up in there, whenever it was before. And so he was due for it. He was. He deserves it. John David's one of the best rib cooks out there. Yeah, I would like to have done it, but it couldn't have happened to a better man.
We're talking with Heath Riles. HeathRilesBBQ.com is the website. Heath, really appreciate the catch up here tonight. And let's not let 6 years evaporate before we get into it again. Certainly appreciate the time.
That'll work. Well, if you can drag out of Ohio, you can come on down to Memphis in May and hang out with us the whole time this year.
All right. Sounds good. Let's put it on the docket. It's Heath Riles right there. So hopefully you enjoyed that segment. I know we're a little over here on the second hour, but that's all right. We'll go ahead and play a little catch-up here, and then we'll get on out. Before we get ready to go, I'm talking to you about who? Aladino! Yeah. Love the Corojo Reserva line, yes, but as I told you last week, I just got a new box in of cigars, the Aladino Classics. So I've had about 4 now, maybe 5. And I reiterate what I said last week. If you're into medium body, medium flavor, I mean, trending ever so slightly into medium full flavor smoke, this is the one for you. I did smoke one of the new Sumatras as well. Limited edition. I think 2 Guys has them. Mr. Jonathan, that store over there. The first one, and I got it in Toros. Wow. It was really good. Not like a normal Sumatra. This one was flavor bomb, to say the least. Both Honduran puros, because all the tobacco is grown in Honduras. But as opposed to the Reserva, I'm trying blends that make or are made with Corojo and Habano. Bottom line, would I take Abacas Reservas every day of the week and twice on Sunday? Of course, they're my favorite. But trying out different blends from the Aroa family demonstrates their expertise in mastering hard-to-grow tobacco varieties and then blending them into a smoking experience that's second to none. As always, if you want a pair of Aladino Classics at this point, you want to try them for yourself and you want to do it on me, shoot me an email, greg@thebbqcentralshow.com. Otherwise, visit them on the website and find a retailer near you, jretobacco.com, and hook up with the Classics or the Reserva, or if you're lucky enough to find that Sumatra, because it is limited edition. You know, everybody's got to have limited edition. Pick up a box. You're going to pick up a box of any of them. You're not going to be like, oh, why did I buy a box? It should be like, why didn't I buy 2 boxes? Let's wrap this show. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Let's get back to a guy who has more experience giving you his opinion than he actually has cooking. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
Welcome back, and we thank Heath Riles for joining us last segment, the extended segment, if you will. HeathRilesBBQ.com, socially at Heath Riles BBQ, R-I-L-E-S, Heath Riles BBQ. And while I never remember to do this, which is giving you the end of the show update on the poll question of the week, as we started, we shall finish. It's a 50-50 split on yes and no with the question, even if money wasn't a factor, you prefer prime over Wagyu. We end with a yes at 50%, and we end at a no at 50%, if you can believe it. I don't remember the last time we started on tie and ended on tie. Deadlocked. Interesting. Well, all the way back in the first hour, we got an origin story from our pal Robert Moss. We learned all about him. Born in 1970, doctorate in literature, also a computer guy, fell in love, 2 sons, kids about the same age as I got. Very interesting. Second hour, Ryan Zboril pits and spits. What did we learn most importantly? Ryan also sided with me on he'll take prime, even if cost isn't a factor, over Wagyu. But more important than that, gas grill line. I'm very excited about that. Can't wait to see it. Maybe I'll get my hands on it. And then we close it out with Heath Riles from Heath Riles BBQ. Check him out at heathrilesbbq.com. A myriad of topics, covered a lot of ground, and appreciate the extended time there from Heath. Big show planned for you next week in the third Tuesday. I believe we have a Steven Reichland sighting. I believe there will be a Wes Wright sighting. Could be a Susie Bullock sighting as well, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's a Daniel Vaughn, but I think it's a Susie Bullock. And we do have somebody closing out the show next week, but I'll be damned if I'm going to remember it right off the top of my head. How do I always leave? September 11th, 2001. I will never forget. Until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Bye-bye.
It's Sam the Cooking Guy, and you're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Some call him a fool, some even call him a douchebag. But I say Greg Rempe is the greatest thing to happen to barbecue since cavemen.